Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Um, we're going through the grand story of the Bible, and this is going to be grand story of the Bible part 3. So what we've covered so far is creation and fall, and we've covered the fall kind of in two parts. First, looking at Adam and Eve, and then looking at that leading up to Noah and the flood, and the Nephilim, sons of God, having marrying daughters of women and producing Nephilim on the earth. And then we finished with, which leads to Noah and the flood, we finished with the Tower of Babel. And so now Noah's descendants goes down, and eventually Abraham is born. And God contacts Abraham. Abraham's he's a shepherd. He's out, actually he's out in what would be modern day Iraq, and he's told to go to a land. God's going to take him to a land that he will show him, and his people, the land will be his and his descendants. And so Abraham lives there, and God makes a covenant with Abraham. This covenant's kind of interesting. God comes in, has Abraham, takes Abraham, says he's going to make a covenant with him. He cuts the animal in two, takes cow, cuts it in half. This would be typical of making covenants at that time, that kings and tribal leaders would do this sort of a ritual with each other. The difference is when God cuts this animal in two and Abraham's watching, and then God passes through the two halves of the cow, used cow. God is normally, what would happen is both parties would go through and walk between these animals. But with this one, only God goes and walks through the animal, and God basically makes a covenant with himself. So in this, God's covenant is that, I'll read this here. You can find it. It's in Genesis chapter 12, chapters 2 and 3. And he says, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And so God is going to use Abraham to bless all the families of the earth. And that's pretty vague. And Abraham comes in, and this is actually very foundational. There's an Old Testament scholar, Peter J. Gentry. He's looking at the Abrahamic covenant. And of course, we really see as we go on how important this is. But he says the Abrahamic covenant is foundational to the Mosaic covenant. Mosaic Israelite covenant is what he calls it. In Deuteronomy, and the Davidic covenant is a further development in the sequence of covenants established by God. So God uses this covenant to form the foundation of how he's going to restore his relationship with all of humanity. Because right now, after the fall of Adam and Eve, followed by Cain murdering Abel, and the people in general going morally downhill, and then the sons of God marrying the daughters of women and producing Nephilim that are on the earth, and these Nephilim turn to be out evil. And then the people trying to find ways to control God by building this tower to try to go up to the gods, to try and have access to God himself. And so out of all of this, God changes their language, spreads them out, and then picks one man and his family and his descendants. And he's going to bless all the families of the earth through this one family. Seems like a long shot to me. And it's foundational to the rest of biblical theology, the rest of covenant theology. So this is one of the foundational things in man's relationship with God even today. But as they make this, Abraham fails. Abraham fails repeatedly. He gives his wife Sarai to Pharaoh, um, and that's not all he does. He also gives his wife Sarah to another ruler, and each time not telling that ruler that she's his wife. And so he gives them her wife, and God protects the person that he gives them to, comes to them in a dream and tells them what's going on, and they give Sarah back to Abraham. And eventually, Sarah can't have children, so Sarah um, gives them her handmaiden, um, servant to Abraham, so she can have a son. And when we're looking at Abraham giving Sarah to Pharaoh, Daniel Block, he says the text is incomplete, but appears that in Egypt, Abraham was the cause of his family's troubles. So Abraham um, didn't keep in mind the covenant that God had made, or didn't fully trust in it. Um, and I mean, that's easy to do. Life is hard. Life was harder then, probably, at least when it came to resources, finding shelter and food. It would have been much more difficult. I mean, I got a refrigerator full of food in the kitchen, and refrigerator with a little bit more food in the garage, and that's pretty common for lower middle class families in America. Even uh, so, most people in America, have an ice box with food just sitting in it. And Abraham, these nomads, um, they have to kill animals to eat, and those animals are often their herds. But then you have to be careful, because eat all the herds, you're not assured of getting more food. So these are probably Abraham's concerns. That, and if Pharaoh's powerful. Pharaoh is like one of those guys that what Pharaoh wants, Pharaoh gets. So maybe Abraham's scared of offending Pharaoh. That's easy for us to fall into too, especially someone big and influential, someone that comes in and has um, a presence that just dominates the room. It's easy to be intimidated by some of those people sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to stand up to them. I think we see that a lot with, celebrities, politicians, people of influence in different holding official positions in different organizations. We see that all over the place today, just in this country, much less throughout the world. And I think Abraham is kind of concerned about that. He's probably a little bit afraid of Pharaoh. The text doesn't really tell us that, but what the text does tell us is that Abraham sends Sarah. And you know, Daniel Block continues. He says the text is incomplete, but it appears that in Egypt, Abraham's time at the name, was the cause of his family's troubles. He forgot Yahweh's promises to give him the land of Canaan, and in blatant self interest, he sacrificed his wife to the Egyptians to save his own life. So it's very much it's a betrayal of his wife in a sense. He's not looking after his wife's needs. He's looking after what he thinks are his needs and his own insecurities. So we see a lot of this just in our own behavior. Well, Abraham gets Sarah back, and Sarah can't have children, and she eventually gives him her servant, gives him a son Ishmael. Only after he has Ishmael does God, as the Bible puts it, open Sarah's womb, and Sarah has a child. And uh, she actually has Isaac, and um, Isaac falls in a similar way with his wife, Rebecca. And Isaac also has issues with Esau. So, um, Isaac falls. Um, Isaac has 12 children. Each of those 12 children fall. Jacob's the best. And Jacob, in a sense, early on, Jacob's a bit arrogant, which gets his brothers angry at him. But other than that, his brothers end up selling Jacob into slavery. In doing this, they actually sow their family security. Jacob goes to Pharaoh. He goes to work for powerful man Potiphar. Potiphar's wife wants to have sex with Jacob. Jacob won't do it, so she lies to Potiphar. Potiphar, of course, believes his wife, has Jacob thrown in jail. Jacob's in jail. Um, predicts, I should say, translates. He understands two of the dreams that two different people have. These two different prisoners. One's a baker and one's a cupbearer. And he has two dreams, and he tells the baker or the cupbearer that he will be restored. Tells the baker that he's going to be executed, and that's what happened. And Jacob asks the cupbearer, "Remember me." For whatever reason, whether the cupbearer is frightened to do it early on, and or whether he's kind of intentionally picking his time, or whether he just forgets until something happens with Pharaoh, where Pharaoh has a dream, and Pharaoh doesn't know what the dream means. And that's when this cup maker tells Pharaoh about Jacob. And he tells Pharaoh, "Hey, I know this guy. He's in prison. He interpreted my dream. He interpreted another guy's dream, and they both came true." So Pharaoh comes in, takes Jacob, and Jacob, he takes, yeah, my mind's getting stuck here. Sorry. Um, Pharaoh takes Jacob and asks Jacob to interpret his dream, and Jacob interprets his dream and even tells him what to do. And Pharaoh sees that Jacob is wise, so Pharaoh puts Jacob in charge of everything. Meanwhile, back in the land of Canaan, where Abraham and Jacob's brothers are, um, Abraham and his other sons, they're starting to go hungry because of this famine. Once the famine hits, right? So they've stored up the wheat for 7 years. The famine hits. Everybody's coming to Pharaoh to get food. And because of Jacob, Pharaoh ends up owning all the land because they end up first trading land for goods, and some livestock for goods, and even selling themselves to be slaves to Pharaoh, to make sure they have food. Over in Canaan, um, Abraham sends Isaac's brothers. He sends them to go and buy food from Pharaoh, and of course, Jacob recognizes them. They don't recognize Jacob. Jacob sends. He kind of gives them a hard time, accuses them of being spies, and then um, he keeps one brother. He tells them, I'm keep one brother and bring back the youngest brother, because they do tell him they have a younger brother. So I'm going to keep one brother. You go to your father. You bring back the youngest brother to me, and then I'll know you're not spies. Well, they go back, and Abraham is grieving because he's lost Jacob, and the youngest brother, Benjamin, is from uh, Sarah. And those are the only two children that Sarah had. So eventually they run out of food, though. And so they have to come back. And they end up bringing Benjamin with them, with the oldest, Judah, telling Abraham, like, if I don't bring Benjamin back, you can have my children to do as you wish with them, which is kind of a bold thing to do. That really showed some character development in his part. So to bring this in, they find out, they come in, and Jacob eventually reveals his identity to them after testing them to see what they would do. Um, you know, framing Benjamin, making Benjamin look like he stole the chalice, and the brothers are in anguish, and you know, uh, Jacob overhears them talking, and Jacob tells them who he is. Asks how Abraham's doing. Asks how his father is. He goes back, ends up having Abraham move down to Egypt. So this is how the Jews moved down to Egypt. And so Jacob ends up being the best of him, because his failing was pretty typical of a young kid. He wasn't really in charge yet. He was just the favorite son. And normally the oldest son is the favorite. So I'm sure that pissed his brothers off. Um, so anyway, they they end up coming in. They're given a plot of land. They're having have their own herds there, and everything goes well. So Genesis ends with Israel living freely in Egypt. And Exodus, the next book of the Bible, Exodus begins with Israel enslaved to the Egyptians. And so that's kind of where I'm going to leave that one. Next time, we will pick up with the Exodus and the coming of Moses. Um, I hope you had this stream, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit the like and share. And, if you do this, if you have any questions that you would like me to tackle, anything that you would like me to make a video on, go ahead and put that chat question in the suggestions below. And I can't promise how soon it'll be, but I'll make a video answering the question. Thank you, and have a great day.